Okay, David, this is where we're supposed to choose a side, green or black.
John, my soul is as black as night. Your turn.
I am black for life.
So we're not fighting? I thought this is where HBO wanted us to pick sides and fight and stuff.
Don't worry, I'm sure we'll find plenty to disagree about on the pod, but we seem to agree on one thing. We both really like this show.
The politics, the drama, the lore. It was made for the Lorehounds.
And since we just finished recapping season 1, we couldn't be more ready to defend our Black Queen in the Dance of the Dragons.
And with the season pass option in Supercast, listeners can get early ad-free access to each weekly scene-by-scene deep dive, plus our custom show guide with all the characters and connections. See you in the Lorehounds podcast feed each week for our Dragonfire hot, but probably positive, takes.
The Lorehounds House of the Dragon coverage is also safe for Team Green consumption. Side effects may include a deeper understanding of dragon lore, a hardened conflict with itself, and an inescapable urge to read the book Fire and Blood by George R.R. Martin. Dragon seeds may experience burning.
Welcome to the House of the Hounds. We're the Lorehounds, your guides to the Dance of Dragons. I'm David.
And I'm Elysia, and this is our feedback podcast for The House of the Dragon, Season 2, Episode 5, Regent.
John's feeling a bit poorly today, so Elysia, thanks for stepping in.
Glad to be here.
And you're going to be back next week because I'm going to be on vacation, so you're going to fill in again. So this is a good little primer, I guess.
Well, now I get to talk to both of you about the show.
Exactly.
And I get to tell you to waffle because I can't do that to John.
We're typically recording our feedback episodes a few days after our main episode breakdown. So if you want to send us feedback, you can send those ravens to our hand of the pod, Nancy M. Thank you, Nancy M. Send those to hotd@thelorehounds.com or use the contact form or the voicemail feature on our website.
And check also the link tree in the episode notes for links to our Discord server, as well as all of our affiliate podcasts and our Supercast and Patreon feeds, where you can subscribe to support the community and get some extra House of the Dragon content.
That's right, like the show guide and early access, ad-free, all that kind of stuff. Anyway,
Yeah,
Elysia,
and hot takes, too.
Yes, and the hot takes as well. Well, let's just jump right into it, shall we? I figured we could bounce back and forth with the emails and Discord messages that our hand of the pod has put together for us in this very fine document, very well
Sounds
organized.
great.
But first, do you have any quick thoughts about the episode or the season overall, just to get us into your headspace? Have you been enjoying the season?
Yes. I mean, I think that this is a great show. I have to say, I got a little book cloaky in the beginning of the season, which is not something I typically find in myself. So I really had to look within. I think it's also it's a case of, we talked about after Dune how things dull the shine of other things when you're really into one particular thing, and that was the case when this season started. I was like, but wait, I'm not done with Interview with the Vampire. Hold your dragons. We'll get to you. And then I wanted, in the first episodes, I wanted them to, I was really had created the story in my head about what they were going to do with the Winterfell plot and how they were going to handle Blood and Cheese, and I was kind of like but Episode 4 was, for me, where the season really kicked into full gear. I knew I was going to lose my favorite character in the show, and Rhaenys, and they did it so well. It was such her leaning back at that last moment when she knew what was happening was everything to me. Yeah, that episode overall, I just thought was handled really well. This one, I know some people are like, "Oh, this is a quieter episode," but of course it is. It should be. I think that this was a good follow-up to the last one. A lot of interesting moving pieces into places, and they're finally getting into the dragon seeds, and that's what I've been most looking forward to.
Right. Oh, right. Yes, the dragon seeds, not scenes. Seeds. Yeah, gotcha.
Seeds. Yeah. No, they're all dragon scenes. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I was saying this on the main pod. Don't sleep on this episode because there's some. Even though there's some, obvious place setting and moving some things into position, there's also some really important character work that I think is pretty. It's subtle and it can be missed, but it's so important and it's so very rich. So
yeah,
cool.
And for the record, I'm into the Damon plot, but of course, yeah, they gave me a castle witch. Of course, I'm into the Damon plot.
Of course you are. It's very witchy this year, isn't it? So we got Acolyte, Dune Sisterhood, Agatha.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I saw you posted on Twitter or something like that, or was it Discord? I can't remember. They all merged together in the brain after a while.
It's a good year for Space Switch fans. Yeah,
exactly. That's what it was. We're gonna have to talk about Dune Sisterhood too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, all right. Well, let's just get right into it. I'll start us off, and then we can just kind of bounce back and forth. I think that'll be a little bit more fun. Okay. Regarding general podcast feedback, we've got Waverly D, aka Professor WD, by email. They say, "Hey guys, thank you for the great in-depth coverage of so many shows I watch. I don't have anyone in my world to nerd out with about HOTD, Severance, Acolyte, and other sci-fi fantasy shows. Hanging out with you is like chatting with friends who are passionate as I am about this stuff. I'm a low-level Patreon supporter, and it's worth every penny. Keep up the good work, Professor WD. P.S. I live in Maine, and I keep hoping to run into Marilyn. I totally want to be friends with her. Well, you are parasocially friends with her, so right. You can count that. And I think one day we do. We joke about the idea of having a moot or a gathering or something together. We know other podcasts have done that and done that pretty successfully. So one of these days, I think we will definitely try to organize something. I'm not sure where we're going to do it since we're so geographically dispersed, but
I mean, my votes are New York and London because both are easily accessible for me.
Right. Fair enough.
I mean, Amsterdam's fine, but I understand London's probably got more draw.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we should mention also, and speaking of low-level supporters, this month is the last chance to get in as a lore founder for the cheapest price because, the content's been ramping up. So we're gonna grandfather in the people who are in the lore founder tier, and then new subscribers will be joining the Lorehound tier.
Right, the newly minted, the recalibrated Lorehound tier. Yeah, and with the lore founder, whether you get an annual subscription or you do the monthly, and I'm sorry to be so salesy right now.
No, but yeah, it's brought up.
Yeah, it's just information at this stage. Is that's going to be, as you said, grandfathered in. So as long as you renew and you keep that, you could keep that in perpetuity. And then if you ever dropped or suspended your subscription or whatever, and then came back, then you would have to enter again at the newer tier rate. So it's a good opportunity to lock in. I mean, I think we're approaching 1 million downloads. I think we're crossing the 300 podcast number for this year. I think, Elysia, strangely, ever since you've joined, things have been
there's been a lot more podcasts.
There's been a lot more podcasts. Why is that?
I don't know. Yeah. But so that's open until the end of the month. My mom just joined.
Oh, hey, mom. Yeah. Hey, Alicia's mom. My mom's joined too. I think John's mom is. So,
hey, we got good moms.
Moms are awesome. We love our moms. All right. You want to read Jacob's?
Yes. So we got an email from Jacob G. It says, "Hi all, first time feedbacking." Well, welcome, Jacob. Hey, on another blog/forum I follow, they use the tag "quote unquote" meta to refer to inside podcast business. Oh. So this is a meta comment. I'm worried that John is being a little cavalier with his book knowledge seeping into the commentary. Oh, okay. Waffo largely works, but your discussion on Broom in this past episode, and before that, is Aegon dead or alive? I can't tell you, but I'm not marking him dead in the show guide section. I'm feeling unintentionally spoiled.
Ooh,
you can
oopsies.
definitely tell me to kick rocks, and that's part of the deal with a book reader. I usually feel it is very valuable to have quote unquote lore knowledge, but I feel it's getting ahead of me here. Thanks for the great coverage and loving the $10 season pass. I have a feeling I'll be a full subscriber before Rings of Power.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you, Jacob
great.
G. Yeah.
And I can't speak for John. I'm sure he'll take this on and think about that. And I will also, as a book reader, take this on and think about that as I'm stepping in this week.
It's not always an easy thing to navigate, and we try to be well balanced, because obviously when we're talking and we want a good conversation flow on the podcast so that we get that fun thing, like you're hanging out with us and we're all sitting around the pub having a pint talking about the show or what have you. And it's very easy sometimes for something to slip out. I'm not necessarily speaking for John in this, just talking as a general podcaster. It can be tricky. So occasionally, if we stray the line, we apologize. We do try to be very mindful. I mean, you had a whole conversation in the Acolyte and the Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast about
spoilers.
About spoilers,
and people said there were not enough spoilers there. But so you have to you have to find the balance for the audience. But also, I do have to say, in John's defense, he has held me back from certain spoilers, like in say the Discord, where because as soon as Alice Rivers showed up, I'm like, I want to talk about Alice Rivers, and he's like, hold.
Well, Jacob G, thanks so much for writing in. Welcome. Please send us more feedback. We always want. And, general note again, before we get even into some more show-specific stuff, just on feedback, I know that sometimes I know this about me when I hear a podcaster say something that I want to correct or update them on or counterpoint, that I'm often more motivated by when there's something I want to push back against or something. And as opposed to when I agree with things or I have additional thoughts, they don't have as much energy or velocity that gets then translated into an email or voicemail or something like that. So I just want to encourage everybody, reverse that a little bit. And when you do agree or when you do feel parallel thoughts, actually take the time and write that in, because it's not just, you're not sending feedback just to us.
Right.
You're sending feedback to the community, and this is the way that the community gets to hear its own voices by us translating your words back out. So, don't let enragement be the only form of engagement. I would encourage and invite everyone to just write in your general thoughts and feelings, and right. So,
absolutely.
All right. Let's talk quickly about, was this a good episode of television? And Eon on our Discord said, this is my favorite episode of the season because of the great character moments and good direction, like the small council when Aemon gets voted in as regent and the camera just focuses on Alicent's drawing realization. This was really interesting because I saw a post somewhere else, maybe it was a Twitter post, that pointed out that the slow push in they had on Alicent as she's having that really intense emotional reaction, borderline panic attack. I don't know how, different people are characterizing it slightly different ways, but that shot was almost a minute long. And for a show to devote a whole minute to a single shot where there's a very, very slow zoom in, that's a really incredible, bold choice as a showrunner, a director to choose for that, right? And to spend that much time with one character having that strong of an emotional reaction, I think is really good. And I echo Eon's comment here.
Yeah, the cinematography in this show has been one of its strongest points for me overall.
Yeah, it's been pretty. It's a beautiful show, like the way that they're setting everything up. So
yeah. Okay, well, so let's get into bringing the book to life production. So we got an email from Elysia that says, or Elysia, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Hi, Lorehounds. Can we just take a moment and admire the wonderful ways they use fire, torches, and candles in the set design on this show? I love how it lights up dark corners and it's used on hanging light fixtures to light up dark ceilings too. I'd love to know how they manage that. Did they just run gas lines to the fixtures, or is it CGI? Or did they put some flammable material up there and hope it didn't cause a bigger fire? I just think that this is a really nice touch, and I sure hope no one got hurt on the set because of it. Speaking of decor, I love the shot you included as the last image in your visual episode recap for episode 5. It gave me a chance to really get a good look at the hundreds and hundreds of scrolls lining the walls of the library at Dragonstone. Wow. I just want to spend a week in this room pulling out random scrolls and reading them. Thanks for all your hard work covering this. Yeah, I mean, as someone who has like an endless scrolls of books. We call them books. We call them in my house. I definitely relate to this. I can answer I think that the fire is CGI because if you
really?
watch, because if you watch the behind the scenes, episodes that they've done, they showed that, for instance, when we saw Corlys back in Driftmark, like on his throne, they showed that before they had built the entire set for that. And this time it was just too expensive to rebuild when they could just build the practical part he needs to interact with and sit on, and do the rest around it with CGI to flesh out the castle.
Wow, that's really interesting. That's a big CGI budget if you're doing a lot of set backdrops.
But it's less, they said, than rebuilding the entire sets every time.
Interesting.
Because it gives them more flexibility so that this season they could move around a bit more.
Huh. Okay. That's cool. Yeah, I did notice what Elysia was saying too on the wall. So like maybe it'll be a daytime shot and you'll see the candle sconce. I guess it would be a sconce. I'm not sure the technical terms for there. And above that on the wall, you'll see the blackened carbon soot on the wall of where the flame would be lit, that at night, and how it's scarring the wall. So they've even gone to that level of detail.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Rhaenyra's library is wild. Visually, it's so tall, and it kind of makes me think of the table a little bit, where they've what do they call it? The painted table, I think, is the actual
right, where they
name
do
for
their war planning. Yeah.
Yeah, Dragonstone, and they have all the candles lit up underneath it to make it glow, and it kind of her library reminds me a little bit of that, with the back glow, just from a back glow standpoint. Yeah. So it's illuminated from behind.
And just the contrast with, we saw last episode, Aegon was clearing out all of his father's books from his room. And I always say, the measure of a leader is what's in their library. I don't always say that. That's the first time I've said it, but I believe it.
Yeah. That's a really good point. It again goes to that one of the themes that they were playing with, especially in season 1 and the early parts of this season, which is the youth versus young, brash, like, oh, I have to act. I don't want to send. What does Aegon say? Something about like swords versus letters or something.
But he's older than Aemond, and Aemond is much more likely to pick up a book.
That's true. Yeah. But maybe not character specific. Just this idea of young people want to get out and do stuff in the world, and older folks may be like, let's think about this for a minute. And I'm not adding a value judgment on either one, but it's somewhere in the middle where you've got to act, but because we see when Rhaenyra doesn't act, or is acting with a different set of motivations that's counter to everything else that the situation seems to be demanding of her, versus just thinking all the time, like Viserys, who just thought all the time, where Aegon was impulsive and jumped on the back of his dragon when he really shouldn't have. That there's that tension there, and I think that's what makes for good drama, right? Is narrative tension.
Well, we do, because this is a key point in the story where we see, the younger generation coming into their own and trying to figure out their own way. Like, what kind of, how do I implant myself in the ruling structure? If I'm supposed to inherit, or I already have inherited. And we see, for instance, like Jace is Rhaenyra's inheritor, and he doesn't want to be safe at home. No, she doesn't want it either, but he can't, he doesn't stop himself. I mean, to be fair, Daemon does the same thing, and he's much older. But Jace is like, I just got to go out there and do some negotiating on my own. I got to act. I got to show that I am a powerful prince in my own right.
Yeah, and that's a real natural tendency for wanting to be in the world and doing stuff. Right? You're like, hey, I've got all this ability and faculty, and let me shape the world. I want to mark the world. I want the world to feel my presence, and I want to feel the world's presence back at me, right?
Right.
I want to know that I've done something. So, all right, Maester Abby. Abby, I'm designating you a Maester. A good friend of the pod and all around fun emailer. She says, "Hello, good sirs and lady of the House of the Hounds, and special greetings to hand of the pod, Lady Nancy. So, episode 5, I started my watch being mindful of the opening tapestry, which, contrary to expectations, did not, in fact, have any new events added to it. Lazy weavers." I'm going to make a side note here. I was listening to Maester Anthony over on, and if you know Anthony from Properly Howard, and we do a bunch of stuff with him. He also does a lot of podcasting with the Bald Move folks. And he was filling in on their episode 5 coverage. And he put forward a theory saying that a tapestry is a public document in a way, right? It's going to be out for people to see. You walk into a room and you see this kind of stuff. So we as show watchers are watching it, and we have, more of a omniscient, quasi-omniscient point of view on this. And so he's saying that, or his theory at this stage is that if the tapestries are kind of a public document in a way, then the only thing that's going to go onto a tapestry is public information. And so what exactly happened with the dragon fight over Rook's Rest may not be as public, because those are just mostly combatants. They can control the information a little bit more, whereas Blood and Cheese was a bit more of a public thing. So it was just an interesting theory. So I think, let's see what happens. They may be intentionally only putting out certain key pieces of information. I don't know. I don't know what your thoughts are on the tapestry weavers.
I mean, first of all, I have to applaud them. Like, I think this is a marked improvement over like the Bloodlines thing.
Agreed.
And but this is also more difficult to update, I think, to animate. It's more intricate. So they might just be like making choices about.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see by the end. I think let's hold our judgments until the end of the season. Anyway, continuing with Abby's email. And then I was just awed by the opening shot of the sunset on Driftmark. These shots of the castles are so gorgeous. By the way, I just want to take a moment and appreciate the great architectural designs and cinematography. The scenery is just beautiful. Some of the castles received renovation from what we saw in various seasons of Games of Thrones, perhaps showing off how much more beautiful they were 100 years before. We have closer views or other angles on Dragonstone and the Eyrie, a new look on Driftmark. The Twins Bridge got a new look too, with a pair of 4 turrets added to as stabilizing structures, maybe with the effect of looking much more safe and solid than in Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I rewound and watched like the approach to the Eyrie this episode like 3 times, and I didn't go back and compare it. I meant to, so I'm glad that Abby acknowledged. Yeah, it is different, right? I'm not making that up. It looks more imposing and solid even.
Yeah, I don't have much. I recognized the Eyrie when they showed to us in this episode, but I didn't have enough of a residual memory, or I didn't go back and look. But I did appreciate, and like she's saying, the overhead shots of the bridge, or the sort of flying over Dragonstone, all of this. So between drones, like actually flying a drone out over the sea at that sort of time of day, and then CGI matting it back in, it's an incredible look. And I think, even though our story is less, like, we're focused in on a handful of characters, and our I guess our field of vision's a bit narrower from a plot standpoint. Visually, they're giving us a real wider sense of the world.
Right.
And we're also getting a lot more small folk point of views. So I think between those two, I don't feel at all claustrophobic or too narrowed in on stuff, because I think visually, like Abby is saying, we're getting a whole lot of new visual information that makes us, even though, we're back at Dragonstone, it's not the same recycled shot of Dragonstone. It's every time it's something new. It's a different new perspective.
Yeah. Okay, shall we continue with Abby's email talking about dragon riding?
Sounds good. Oh, and just a quick note. If you do send in an email, sometimes Nancy will chop up your emails thematically. So, and people are actually starting to write that way and actually subheading their emails. You do not have to do that if you send in an email. You don't have to worry about grammar, punctuation, spelling, nothing.
Right.
Just send it in. We'll handle it. We'll read it. We're totally fine. We have no judgments about stuff. People writing on trains while they're commuting or, using the voice to text, whatever. It doesn't matter. Don't be self-conscious about that at all. Yeah. Anyway, just to say that Abby's email is chunked up a little bit here. And so sometimes we do that for to put things into categories. Anyway, carry on.
So Abby says, I very much look forward to the dragon tryouts. The fact that Jace came up with the idea, now that is poetic. It is a necessity, but also a trap. New can of worms getting opened. Wondering if we will see all the dragons from the histories or just the name-dropped ones. Vermithor, Silverwing, Sea Smoke. I'm pretty sure we also saw another key one. I guess I won't name-drop just because of the spoiler warning earlier, but I think we saw that one in the trailer. Anyway, this might be a point where the show's story might deviate further from the written stories if some characters get written out of this telling. But that dragon that I think she's referring to, I think we saw a different character approaching in the trailers. So far, so good. The show does a good job in making most characters three-dimensional and making the world realistic and giving more perspectives on events. Conclusion, I did like the episode. All in all, I'm looking forward to hearing all the other perspectives and theories and the community will have. Your friend, Abby.
So we, in the Discord, I grabbed an image and then somebody else grabbed another image showing the relative sizes of different dragons. And then I think the second image that got posted, people were like, oops, this has writer names on it. So we had to quickly get that sort of spoiler covered over. It is really tough because dragons and dragon writers and who's doing what when is actually really big spoiler stuff, right?
Right. And also not even just that it names the names, but it names future titles for different characters. So
right. So, but I think it's very interesting to see these different dragons and see these different relative sizes. God, some of these dragons are just massive.
Well, it's also, I mean, they take some liberties in the show because they have to, but basically as that one that had to be spoiler blocked that you were talking about shows is that Drogon, the biggest dragon of Daenerys in the Game of Thrones series, is the size of a horse compared to Vagar, who's the size of a mountain.
Yeah, or Balerion, who's even
bigger. Yeah,
it's crazy to think about that. Yeah, well, Dance of Dragons, that's what we wanted for this this season, right? So
right.
Yeah, I was wondering about this too. I mentioned this on the main pod. Was okay. Fine, we've got some dragon seeds out there. Conceivably, they're going to try to, work the angle here, and then that opens up the whole question of how do you bond with a dragon, and how does a dragon sense somebody that it can, it wants to take on, all of that stuff. The fact is, once you put a human being on there who's not grown up in and around dragons and dragon lore and dragon fighting combat techniques and okay, when the dragon does a barrel roll, this is how you hold on, all these really specific techniques. You can't, I can't just jump in. I can't go down to the local National Air Guard, base and just jump into an F-15 or an F-16 or something like that and go flying.
Right. Well, the one difference though is that an F-15 or F-16 will at least let you sit in the cockpit, no problem. There is no guarantee with a dragon that's gonna. Because we heard Bela, Rhaena almost got killed with a recent attempt.
Exactly. All right. Severin and Rocky Zim had a couple of Discord comments. Severin says, I can't imagine the dragons will accept the first person they meet. Curious to see who,
there we go.
quote unquote, doesn't make the cut. Yeah, right. When you don't make the cut with a dragon, it's a real cut. And then Rocky Zim says, the dog will become a dragon rider and get revenge for his owner's death. He gets Vermithor, such a good boy.
Rocky Zim, did you read the book?
Yeah, book spoiler. Bleep this one. That's funny. Oh, the poor dog.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, but
I
I
hope
think
we
that
see someone adopt the dog, though, since they keep showing us the dog.
right. Yeah, the dog was in the background of the shot of Alicent and Cole talking the whole time. It was there, like just really great attention to detail. Good job, showrunners and every production folks for just thinking through the little details. Really, really, this is the kind of quality and standard that we expect from HBO.
Right. That's a stuff that I love from a show of this caliber. I have to say Interview with the Vampire also did it exceptionally well, where you have the story that's going on the screen. And, that's, of course, the most important thing to follow. But especially on rewatches or if you're paying more attention, there are these entire stories that play out in the background. That's, just add an extra layer of appreciation when you go in deeper into it.
Yeah. Richness. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so we also have on this subject a message on Discord from Cyrus Facepalm, and
who's also gets a Maester title.
Who also gets a Maester title, and says, I have seen a lot of chatter in the wider fandom about dragon bonding, mainly differences between claiming a living dragon versus bonding with a hatchling. Here is my understanding. The old Valyrians most likely created dragons with magic and bound them with Valyrian dragon lord bloodlines. This meant that people of that bloodline could not bond with dragons. We do not know if this was propaganda or real. The Targaryen children were given eggs in their cradle that made it easy for these children to bond with their dragons. It's harder to claim a living dragon. Examples of Targaryens whose dragons hatched and bonded with them are Rhaenyra and Syrax, Jace and Vermax, Luke and Arax, R.I.P., Aegon and Sunfire, Baela and Moondancer. Examples of Targaryens that claimed a living dragon are Aemond and Vhagar, Daemon and Caraxes, Rhaenys and Meleys, Helena and Dreamfire. In summary, bonding with hatchlings is much easier than claiming a living dragon. All of this talk of why Rhaena could not claim a dragon, it's not because of lack of trying, as clarified in the show, but rather it's not that easy. And I have to say, justice for Dreamfire, who gets no fun dragon time on screen. Helena, the show sometimes forgets she's a dragon rider, and
that's right. Yeah,
take exception to that.
Right. Yeah. So I guess the idea of using the mammalian, our primary world, mammals, baby mammals imprinting on a parent, and that is a primary tool because mammals need to be taught. That's what play often is about. So especially like with cats or dogs, things like that, dolphins, whatever, just mammals in general, because of the brain structure and the way that mammals work, we need play, we need to interact, we need to imprint, we need to be taught things. Whereas a lot of time with fish and reptiles and other things, they're born knowing everything they're going to know, maybe building some experience, but in terms of their basic function of their biological destiny, if you will, they have all the tools that they need to survive. So you see like a baby shark is hatched. It just goes off and swims, and it's just taking its time until it can grow. Same baby alligator, snakes, things like that, turtles. They may learn over time. I'm not saying that they don't learn or they don't have an inner life of some kind, but in terms of basic tools, whereas mammals, you need to be taught a lot of things. And there's a lot of things that only come through experiential. So taking that, sorry for diverging there, taking that idea that, okay, the dragon needs to imprint on somebody once it's hatched, that, or it doesn't need that, but that is when that is there, what that makes available is a bonding and a relationship. The dragon can identify that person as hey, this is an important person in my life. I am imprinted. Versus an adult like trying to go and ride Vhagar. That's wild as an adult as she is, for Aemond. Yeah, that was scary and
yeah. But that's something I think only a brash teenager would do. Back to your earlier point, yeah.
Yeah, really good point. Because if Vhagar didn't want you, she would stomp you or burn you or bite you or whatever. There's nothing you can do, right? So, okay, cool. Thanks, Cyrus. Thanks for being a subscriber and such a great supporter of our community. On to Bridge Diplomacy, Jace and the Phrase. I see what you did there, Nancy. Bridge Diplomacy. Abby, another part of her email. I need to mention the scene with Jace and the phrase. These people always want too much and overplay their own importance. Harrenhal, they're shopping for sure. A lot of water and blood will flow down the Trident, or if they even get the chance at ruling that, in my opinion. Jace is good at this diplomacy. He sure received a grown-up season. Yeah, he surely received a grown-up title this season, but now has another signature look.
Oh, I think she means a glow-up.
Oh, a glow up. Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
A lot of people are crushing on Jace now. I'm not saying Abby is, but the internet is loving Jace.
Yes, that is true. That's right. A glow up this season, but now has another signature look of leaning on the pommel of his sword, which he carries at all times everywhere. He does that little thing. That feels a bit rigid. Is he rehearsing in front of a mirror to look if he's princely enough? Just a reminder for us all that he's still so young.
Right.
That is true. He is young, but I understand that his character from the book is that he does have a bit of a gift at diplomacy, right? Without being spoiler, just as a general characteristic.
Yeah, although, he made me nervous with his conversation with the phrase, just because he's promising things that he can't necessarily promise on his own. And that's surely that always comes back to bite you in the butt.
If you're promising Damon to do something, book or no book, it doesn't matter. This is Damon that we're talking about here. You are really gambling.
Well, I have to say, one thing, in terms of book spoilers or whatever, one important thing to keep in mind is that the book, for listeners to keep in mind, is that the book is a secondary source. So this is repeating what other people have said, some of it very salacious rumors in some cases. But so the idea of what we're seeing in the show is that it is, the real versions of what happens. And then, what gets written down is what history remembers. And,
or what people, what history remembers by way of, I have a point of view and I'm going to inject my internal,
Right. By way of someone who's very biased towards one of the sides, for instance,
Exactly.
So even when we have spoilers, they're the loosest of spoilers at best, because a lot of these details of like Jace's negotiation, things like that,
Fair enough.
We don't really exactly know how these things go down. The next comment is from me, and this was one before John realized he wasn't going to be able to do this. He crossed this one out, and I was like, "No, this is the only intelligent thing that I said this week on the Discord. You leave that one in." So I said, I think the phrase, their family status is tied to the twins being a place of passage. You can't go north or south without passing through their stronghold. That's the source of any power they have, so they cling to it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I think it dovetails with Abby's comment, which is their sense of self-importance. How important are they? And whether Go for it.
No, this was, by the way, in relation to somebody. So, because I wrote this myself, I know what I was responding to. This was in response to somebody asking about the doors being portrayed always with the phrase. So I was saying that's why the doors are seen with the phrase, why they emphasize the doors so much.
Gotcha. There. Right. Yeah, for sure. And they're they're the ultimate gatekeepers, right?
It's literally their one thing.
And they feel the importance of that, and that they give themselves a status because of that. And whether it's warranted or unwarranted, or however people are doing it, that's how they're relating to themselves as this key passage. And when it comes to thinking strategically about where different forces need to come, it really does create. I mean, you've got the neck, and you've got some other things. Is it Moat Callan? Like, you have a kind of a wetlands area as well that separates the north. But this really does provide, the
right. But that's dangerous, as you can't cross an army through there. Yeah.
Right. And so, this really does create an important choke point between north and south, and even to the Erie to some degree, right? If I understand right? If I understand
right. Well, the Erie's the Erie's off to the side. Yeah.
Well, let's not get into too much geography. Anyway, strategically, it's important.
I do miss I like the tapestries they're doing, and I understand why they want to switch it up, but it was so handy to have every episode of Game of Thrones start with a map.
That's true. Yeah, to let us know where we are and that kind of stuff.
That's my favorite thing growing up about fantasy books is the maps in the front covers.
That's true. Yeah, I would always do that. The Dune books you didn't have. Well, I mean, you did have there was some map stuff that was important actually.
Yeah, not in the front of every book, but like you could get the materials.
Yeah, but it's certainly for Lord of the Rings. I was always map checking.
Wheel of Time.
Yeah, 100%. All right, Athena Agelia on the Discord. So I was curious, and I think I realized why I got so fixated on the door at the phrase. Oh, here we go. So this is
okay. So I was responding to this. Yeah,
got it. Okay, there's a story from the book Voices of Chernobyl where there's a person who went back into the exclusion zone to take the front door from his home and get it out of the area. His specific family had a tradition of laying the deceased on the door before burial. Here is an excerpt. My father lay on this door. I don't know whose tradition this is. It's not like that everywhere. But my mother told me that the deceased must be placed on a door of his home. He lies there until they bring the coffin. I sat by my father all night. He lay on this door. I think this is interesting. I think it's an interesting thing from a ritual perspective, the importance of doors in some cultures. I want to know the significance for the phrase. Okay, got it. Okay. So going back to what you were saying, which is they're the ultimate gatekeepers in this way.
Right.
That's a really interesting ritual, and that's a really interesting idea. The whole idea. We talk a little bit about it in the Earthsea series, which we're going to finish. We know it's been delayed.
I mean, everyone knows it's hot summer.
Yes, exactly. But this idea that there, the boundary between life and death, and these different thresholds, and the way that those thresholds are depicted, be it a door, be it a river, be it a wall, but there's some sort of boundary or demarcation between where we are in the living and what's beyond, and whatever that may be. And so even in this regard, with just crossing a river, a really big river, the doors are what keep people from accessing that. And so they control access.
Yeah, and rivers are often the passage to death too.
That's true.
Yeah, plains. Okay, so talking about the mother, Christina J. said in an email, "Hiya, I noticed that there's a certain amount of rancor when it comes to Alicent as a mother that is not extended to Viserys or Daemon, who both are deadbeat dads." Thank you. I was actually going to stand up for Alicent the first chance I got. We'll get back to this. So Christina says, "So I wonder, why is a mother's neglect judged more egregious than a father's? Have we acclimated socially to a diminished father's role, influence versus the responsibility of a mother's being the bearer of said child? Regarding how women ruled political power at this time historically, mothers were often kept from their male children so as to not have undue influence on them. Males were indoctrinated in a very patriarchal and warring society based on whatever masculine factors were prevalent at the century. It may be why many of the lead males suffer from the lack of maternal love. Women could wield power temporarily, but only on behalf of a male figure, i.e., an heir too young to rule or a sick king. That was Alicent's role, however. She learned a lot, too, from Viserys and Otto, how to rule, and we saw wasn't against the protest of her father's choices. They would often be sent to broker peace, as women were often perceived as being the bearer of such weaknesses and a mercy due to the plea/negotiation on the male's behalf, further diminishing their political worth despite its astuteness." So, yeah, so we have two things that are being talked about here, both Alicent as a mother and Alicent as a woman trying to negotiate what kind of power she has versus the wisdom. She seems to be one of the wisest people in Team Green, I think we can say. And on the mother point, one thing that I've been noticing is that I think people are too hard on Alicent as a mother. Like, Rhaenyra is a bit warmer, but Alicent also had a much colder father, so she's passing on what she experienced and the way she was raised, with a parent-child relationship to be. But I do think we see real concern for her children, like even Aegon. I think the one she likes least is Aemond.
Well, and then what's that emotionally like to realize that your one child tried to murder the other one, and that has this, extremely extreme ruthlessness
Right.
imbibed in them. So yeah, that's got to be hard.
Right. Well, I think as soon as he murdered Rhaenyra's child, she was like, and I'm done with you.
Yeah. The idea, I think it's easy for us to pile on Alicent, and I think that's a fair point, a fair check by Christina to say, hey, check yourselves here a little bit. Let's back up and take a look. And I think it's a really good point, because it's very easy to pile in on Team Green, right? There's between Cole and Aemond and Aegon and everybody.
I mean, I'm Team Black. Team Black is much more my vibe, but yeah.
Right, exactly. But and they're drawing a very clear contrast between the different styles between Rhaenyra and Alicent. But I think you also make a really good point, which is, what did Alicent have? She had a very cold, calculating, distant father. She didn't have a second parent to offer any sort of counterbalance. Her husband was also a very distant and I wouldn't say cold isn't the right word. He had a lot of heart, and he had a lot of,
but it wasn't a great love.
No, and she didn't fall in love. They didn't fall in love together or start out together. She was attached to him, and then he was sort of for the stability of the realm, all of these things. So she really did get kind of funneled into this really difficult position.
I think in most, like, the men, her husband, her lover, I think they all kind of loved Rhaenyra more.
Sure. Right. Yeah. And she has a very different path as well.
Rhaenyra's also gotten more love. Like, she had more of a, Daemon might be being a little poop right now. And that is who Daemon is. But, she had more of a love match with him than Alicent ever got to experience. And yeah.
Right. Yeah, for sure. For sure. So I think it's a tough beat for Alicent. So, being a little bit, keeping that in mind. That's also this interesting note about how male heirs, specifically heirs, might have been funneled and treated and educated, and the kind of parental engagement that they would have between between parents. I think that's a really interesting thing. I'm sure it'd be interesting to see internationally how that is, especially when we're talking about ruling classes. Certainly in Shogun, we saw a bunch of that on our screens this year with that series, where the heir is, very boxed in many regards and treated in certain ways, but expected to be able to. And back to this show, Rhaenyra says, if I were a man, they would have taken a sword and put that in my hand, and I would have been training that way. Instead, I've got a whole different pathway.
Right.
All right, let's move on to Waverly D sends in an email. So frequently we discuss the differences between Rhaenyra and Alicent in terms of their mothering. It came up again in your discussions of this episode. Okay, so following on again. A lot of times we don't read these emails when they're coming in, so these are fresh. So I always love it when they dovetail back into each other. One thing I have yet to hear discussed is how the showrunners seem to be leaning into the effect of circumstances of conception on parent-child relationships. We had to endure a pretty awful scene of Alicent and Viserys engaging in intercourse. No joy for mom there. It's pretty clear the strong sons of Rhaenyra were conceived in love and passion, as were her toe-headed twins. She and Laenor tried to conceive, but in Rhaenyra's words, we took no joy of it, and it didn't work. Alicent's kids came out of the womb colicky, and unhappy, and grew up into dysfunctional adults. Alicent may have been fond of Viserys, even loved him, but she was essentially raped to get heirs for the kingdom. I guess the moral of the story is that if you want kids to have happy futures and are easier to love, maybe loving the process of making those babies plays a role.
I mean, there was actually a theory, it was called maternal imprinting back in our own real world back in the day. It's obviously been debunked, but they believed, for instance, the person we call the Elephant Man, they said in the sensationalist newspapers that his mother, there was a riot. Apparently this is true. Maybe, I think there was a riot when she was pregnant with him and an elephant escaped, and they said she was so scared by that. That's why her son.
He said Elephant Man,
Yeah.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think, too, if we look at families are complex, always have been complex. There isn't some sort of, oh, it's suddenly this way now as opposed to that way. Like our family structures have always been evolving and across culture and across time. I think one thing that, and I myself am adopted. I'm adopted at birth. I've always known that. It's always been part of my identity. I know for other people that's different. I know parents who've adopted. We have some really good friends who, their child is adopted at a little bit older age. We know some other people who are about to take on a foster a parent. And I think from a parent standpoint, the act of declaring your identity as parent and starting to take those actions, that changes you and that sort of changes your brain psychology in some ways, that you're starting to activate and starting to recognize and come to terms with a lot of hidden assumptions that you've had about life and about the way that you've been parented and the imprinting and the lessons that imprinting I'm using loosely, but all of the patterning, the things that with the lessons that we observe and take as mammals. And then as a child, being able to go, that is my parent, that is me, that is my person, these are my people. Yeah, I don't think there is some interesting biological connectivity, but that at the same time, we have frontal cortexes, we have brains that can override certain, so there's a wide degree of adaptability within our species and within our cultures. And I think one thing that works is that having a rich parental engagement, be it one parent, two parent, different forms of that. Because even now with foster and adoptive parents, that whole mix can be very different because you could still have connectivity to your biological parent, whereas your social legal parents are the people that might be raising you on a daily basis. So it's a really complex thing, but I think the thing that that we could agree on is that rich engagement is the important part. Love and engagement, that's the important.
Well, yeah, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up another idea from science, which is called epigenetics. And basically, this is the idea that you have your DNA, but you can have like little add-ons to your DNA based on your experiences. And this can cause, for instance, they think it might be linked to passing on anxiety, things like that, based on past traumas. But it is also possible to change your epigenetics. You can't change your DNA, or CRISPR aside, we'll ignore that for the moment.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
but naturally, you can't, just will your DNA to be different. And it's not that with epigenetics it's that easy either. But it is possible to influence that through things you say, like better circumstances, nurture, more mindfulness, things like that. Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of at that meta level too, as well. And then we have our as lived daily experience and the things that. So it is a really complex thing, and the more engagement and support and love that we have, we know that as an individual, that creates a different set of conditions. And I think Waverly brings up a really good point here, that the household of Viserys and Alicent and being in the Red Keep and the castle and all of that kind of stuff is a very Rhaenyra was there, but Strong, her baby daddy was there and engaged with the parents, and we saw the difference between engagement and lack of engagement. I think is had that effect. So
yeah.
Complex stuff, obviously. So we're doing our best here to sort of weave and navigate. I'm sure people have opinions, and please send us your opinions. Yeah, we welcome the discourse on parental stuff. And I think that's one of, again, just to point it out, is that this is what's interesting for us in our communities, to talk about the real world relative to our fantasy world.
Right. Because I think that's the greatest thing that that literature in general, but I do find that there's especially a place for it in speculative fiction and fantasy and sci-fi, because you're questioning, why is the world the way it is, and what if it were different, and so yeah,
Exactly.
it helps you process the world we actually find ourselves in when we put down the book.
That's right. Well, Elysia, let's take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll finish. We'll keep on with the email.
Okay.
And we're back. Okay, looks like we've got next up Marilyn, our favorite Tolkien scholar. Do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So she says, from Neil Shipley's blog, Watching the Swedes, in Swedish, there is a term, vargtimmen, sounds like vargtimmen. Yeah, sorry, my Swedish pronunciation's not great. Vargtimmen, which translates as hour of the wolf. It is used to specifically describe the time between 3 and 4 a.m. Although it sounds like an ancient concept, it was actually coined by Swedish film director Ingmar Bergman in his 1968 film of the same name.
Interesting.
Or so he claimed. He describes Vargtimmen in the following way. The hour of the wolf is the hour between night and dawn. It is the hour when most people die, when sleep is the deepest and nightmares are the most vivid. It is the hour when insomniacs are hunted by their worst anxieties, when ghosts and demons are at their most powerful. The hour of the wolf is also the hour when most babies are born. Other academics believe the concept existed earlier than Bergman's time, and that it refers to the fact that farmers would get up in the night to protect their wild stock from hunting wolves. Whatever the origin, the hour of the wolf has a definite mystical and almost terrifying implication. When was the last time you lay awake at 3 a.m. and chased your demons? All the insomniacs are raising their hands. But there is one of my favorite pre-industrial era fun facts is that we do have evidence that in Europe, at least, it was common for people to sleep in two shifts before electric lights. And so they would get up in the middle, usually before 3 a.m. So they would be back in bed by then, but more like 1 a.m. And they'd get up and like write things or make babies or.
Yeah, there was even I think in the American histories, there was even a thing where there was like a board that was in between, like people would share a bed, siblings or, related cousins or things like that, and then they would lay in bed and talk at night and this kind of stuff. So there's not a lot of history, and I think even some people were like questioning the whole binomial sleeping pattern thing. I don't know. There's a lot of mix.
Just because it happens in some places doesn't mean it happened everywhere. We should be careful about that. So, but there is evidence that it happened at least in England.
For sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I certainly have family members and know other people who are like, yep, I wake up and I'm awake, and then I'm awake for a while until I go back to sleep. And it's nothing that they do or try. It is a thing for sure. Following up, Abby, so another part of her email, checked those Westerosi time measurements. As opposed to how many legs his dragons have, Gurm can't.
I support you, George.
Really can't be bothered with calendars. Just AC and BC, convolutedly counting from their equals after Aegon's conquest or before. Seasons, days of the week. They have religious services in septs every 7 days or hours. There's an obsession with the nighttime as all the named hours of the night in order: hour of the bat, hour of the eel, hour of the ghosts, hour of the owl. Is this Alice Rivers' preferred time? Yes, good commentary. Hour of the wolf, the darkest, hour of the nightingale, and then dawn. Interesting. What is hour of the eel about? That's strange. I don't know. Bats? Yeah, bats are usually.
I mean, eels are nocturnal, right?
I don't know much about eels to be honest. I know that there's a lot of question about eels because they go from salt to freshwater, and there's this whole thing where do they spawn and whatnot. Bats are crepuscular, so active at dawn and dusk.
Right. I love bats. With the most I know about eels, it's very Game of Thrones appropriate, but there's these horrible eel pulling competitions. I won't describe it. I'm an animal lover. Hey, don't look it up if you're an animal lover.
Eels are an important dietary item in the Netherlands. I know that.
Yeah, especially previously, but still, yeah.
Yeah. Well, now it's a little bit more of a specialty, I guess, maybe than yeah. And then Aller's
sure,
wolf.
no, you can just get it at the Paling. It's called. You get just like eat it dried. Ugh,
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
like
I had a Dutch colleague that I worked with once, and I
Mhm.
brought them back eel. Where we lived, he didn't have access to it, so I was like, he was very excited when I brought him eel.
Yeah.
He was like, "You want some?" I was like, "No, thanks." The Hour of the Wolf, though, which I think is interesting, is statistically, is that true? Is that when most people die and most people are born? I think that's
I don't know.
yeah. I would not fault Marilyn's scholarship.
Well, she's quoting Neil
She's
Shipley's
quoting,
book. Yeah.
right? That's true. All right. You want to switch us
Well,
over
before we
to,
move on,
please?
there was a request on the Discord to explain the dragon legs reference. I don't know if you guys. I don't remember if you guys talked about that in the main episode.
We did not. I referenced it, but John hadn't researched the thing, and then I only have sort of
Right.
whatever the frothiest stuff is. Do you have a bit more information?
Yes, no. So I mean, I read the blog post. It's basically for anyone who's wondering why people keep talking about George R. R. Martin and dragon legs. He published a post on his own blog and his own website called Not a Blog, and he was talking about the fact that in the show world, he very specifically says dragons have 4 limbs, so that's 2 back legs and 2 wings. And he's frustrated that the Targaryen sigil should look like that as well. Sigil should look like that as well. And he's frustrated that the show version of 4 legs plus 2 wings should be. It has been creeping on to now they're putting it on the covers of his own books. I think that was the key line for me. I was like, yeah, no. It's like, no, that is not the physiology of a dragon. So I support his right to scream into the night about the number of legs that his dragon should have.
And somewhere along the line,
and it's science-based too, his points, yeah.
Sure, yeah, and the way that the
He spells
bat
it out,
wings,
yeah.
But somewhere along the line, somebody made a design choice, and then that crept in, and then nobody questioned the design choice.
Well, yeah, he said he vociferously protested, and they just overruled him. So he took to his blog. So I say, do it.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
All right, Damon's Magical Mystery Tour of Harrenhal. Do you want to pick up Abby's email from here?
Yeah, so Abby says, next to Harrenhal, I think the Magical Mystery Tour has gone far enough. I like the first 2 times when
a lot of people are complaining. Sorry,
yeah,
a lot of people are complaining about this. Like, where's it going? Why are we doing this?
Yep. I like the first 2 times when we were introduced to the sinister, gloomy vibe of the castle that may have induced some bad dreams for Daemon, meant to face his guilt, regrets, and darker ambitions. The Witch of Harrenhal is weird enough. Do I love her as many people I hear do? Jury is still out. This episode, just why? Is this all a projection, prophetic vision of what the eye patch will be up to on these grounds, or what his dreams might look like? And now Daemon is also channeling Bran the Builder. Is it all a dream? I need to see where this is going, if anywhere. If they wrap up this storyline in a satisfactory way, I will like it better. Claire Kilner, director of the episode, said on the official podcast that they had quote-unquote fun shooting the scenes and that it is quote-unquote poetic. Some friends of mine told me they love it and it is perfect. I can't find either the poetry or the perfection yet, but I will be glad if I am wrong. 3 more episodes. There's still a way to go.
You love Alice Rivers, right? I do. I think she's great.
No, I think she's very interesting, and I like the sort of dreamy Lynchian vibes of what's going on there. Where I love the way it's edited, especially where he seems to be having a dream, and then he just finds himself in the middle of like a group of people making official decisions at a table.
It's very disconcerting.
Yeah, exactly. So I think I like this. I was inclined to like Alice because she's one of the 2 witchiest characters in this part of the story. And I just find her interesting. And, I always say, like, I want the TikTok of Taylor Swift, like, I knew you were trouble when you walked in.
Yeah.
when Daemon first clocks her.
Go ahead.
Oh, so were we going to ask?
I was going to say, where are you on John's theory is that Alice herself is a vision?
I feel like I can't I've heard this theory and I see where it's coming from. I feel like I can't comment upon that.
Okay. Got it. Put a pin in it. Too meta, but something.
Yeah. I mean, if that is the case, then that raises questions about how other things will be handled.
Okay.
That's all I'll say.
It's very complex, right? Very complex.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I've heard a lot of people going like, what is this? Why is this? Where is it going to go?
Mm-hmm.
I'm at the point where I have, like, you've been enjoying it visually, as well as for Damon's character. I am on the side of, okay, you've established now, it's very clear that something weird is happening, but how is that actually going to translate into whatever's next? I'm ready for it to tick forward. Even if it's incremental, it's fine. But I do need a little bit of a forward motion as to how is this going to affect things, the rest of the story. So, all right. Let's switch over. I'm going to read these next two sort of back to back. We've got Marilyn, our favorite Tolkien scholar, and John. She sent by email, and then we have John on the Discord, and this is all about the Oedipus complex stuff. The main point of the story of Oedipus, as I understand it, is hubris. Oedipus thinks he can defy the destiny declared for him by the Delphi oracle, which is linked to Apollo and so to deities. He spends most of his life post-prophecy looking for the killer of the former king whose throne he sits on and whose wife he married, only to discover that it was he himself. His wife mother hangs herself, and he blinds himself. There is more than a touch of Oedipus in Turin Turambar for those who know the Silmarillion. And Damon certainly has enough hubris to power all the villains in the kingdom. The complex is, okay, so now switching over, the Oedipus complex, is a notion of Freud's that once they grow out of babyhood, men secretly resent their father's close relationship to their mother and secretly desire to have sex with their mothers to possess them and to overcome their fathers as a rival for their mother's affection. Properly developed men will have replaced the wish with a desire to marry women they are not related to. The Damons of the world will have trouble with this. And then John on the Discord. So listening to the pod, and the guys brought up the Oedipus complex. It's interesting to note that this complex is incredibly prevalent in serial killers who target women and serial rapists. Now, as Damon is slowly losing his mind, is this the path they are suggesting he's headed? I think it's possible that if he goes full Mad King. Now, I haven't forged the psychology link in my Maester's chain yet, so take this for what it's worth. And Elysia, you've studied psychology as part of your Maester's chain making. I'm sure you have some opinions on the Oedipal complex.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said to John, I don't disagree with what he's saying. And I think if you want that specific angle explored well, watch the show Mindhunters. They talk a lot about that because this is also how it's a show about how they develop this psychological profiling of serial killers. And I have to say, as part of my Maester's chain, I did actually take a course on serial killers from a self-proclaimed sociopath. But
interesting. Okay.
But yeah, Marilyn's obviously she gives the more fuller academic contrast and you know the explanation of what exactly is involved from both perspectives, where you know we have the play Oedipus Rex, and then of course yes there is also the Electra complex, which is the kind of the opposite that comes from
which I guess when I was skimming the wiki article, I guess Jung, who were Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud were quite close friends.
Jung was basically a sort of an acolyte of Freud in a way, but then they ended up diverging in opinions and having a fallout. Yeah.
Right. And I think the Electra complex is one of those differences of opinion where Freud just was like, yeah, it's all Oedipal. And Jung was saying, no, there's some differences here. I gather from the Wikipedia.
I mean, I think the main thing was Jung's like collective unconsciousness idea. But and I think actually the main thing is that they're both kind of bastards, especially Freud.
Right. But at least not on their main divergence, but that was one of the little things was, is there the Electra versus the Oedipal, and how they each characterized it. I don't know.
Freud was not very scientific, I have to say, but sorry, go ahead.
get that last in there.
We didn't say that. That needs to be said.
The thing that I wonder is this a conscious choice by the writers, or are we adding our own sort of meta social context to the Oedipal storyline here, be it Oedipus Rex and the Greek tragedy versus the Freudian psychology thing? Those things are clearly at play here, and it's just I'm just curious as to what the writers were intending, because sometimes writers will put in something like this and it'll just be a glancing reference or just a very general broad thing, and then the fans go all crazy in on it. Right. Or other times they're like, no, we put this here intentionally because they were actually saying something. And I think at this point, I don't know whether it's intentional or not.
I don't think it's necessarily intentionally about that. I think it's meant to draw a parallel with Aemond, because we already saw, Daemon following who he thought was Aemond through the castle, only to turn around and see it was his own face with an eye patch.
Right.
And we've seen...
Which is very Luca and Dagobah.
Right. And we've seen Daemon, we've talked about, Aemond, we've talked about that, Daemon didn't get much of his mother's love because she died. Aemond didn't get much of his mother's love because, with all due respect to Alicent, who I defended earlier, she's a little bit of a frigid bitch, and she has her reasons for that. But so in Aemond's case, we see him going out and seeking that kind of more maternal style love in a sexual way from his favorite Lady of the Night. And both, so I think that the scene with Daemon and his mother was meant to further draw the parallel between them, but both of their fathers are dead, so it can't really fully be the Oedipal complex here. Although I guess, I guess they want to become the great men they were in some way.
Right. All right, let's move on. Fun times at the Red Keep for Team Green. You want to read Abby's?
Okay. Yes, Abby says, off to King's Landing. I will not add anything on the very bad PR move, but that look Alicent gave Aemond in the royal dagger that he carries now as a prize of war. She suspects that all is not as it seems. And the very bad PR move was Melis's head, which hurt my heart so much. Abby says, Helena knows. I would argue that this episode also had a shocking part, and that is the gruesome healthcare administrations performed on the Aegon body. I don't know. Yeah. His brother doesn't hide his glee, just really cold. Is Aemond competent, knowledgeable? More than Aegon, sure. Better read and more proficient in sword fighting, but maybe less open to the council as he thinks himself the smartest, bestest of them all. And besides, he is still motivated by getting revenge for past slights over and over. It never seems enough. Will he make the best decisions? Maybe not. He sure loves his new role. I noticed how he is always man-spreading. Yeah, with his arms in his hands. I call it Aemond spreading. I've taken pictures of this. He's always doing that. At the council table, also when he was standing over his brother's bed, Elysia, I'm saying I noticed that too. Trying to take up as much space as possible to show he's the big shot. I know show people said so, that we are now supposed to feel sympathetic towards Criston Cole with his battle fatigue and reality check, but he made his own bed, as did Alicent. They are both realizing they are screwed, and not just by each other. Not many options left for the Dowager. Please try to keep Helena safe somehow.
Yeah, I think that's something we were debating is outside of wartime, would Aemond be a good king or not? Would he understand the importance of a well-functioning economy and a healthy small folk population and, all of these kinds of things? Or is he truly some sort of sociopath who only cares about his own glory and ego? To me, it's yet to be seen. Because he's only ever existed within the power dynamic of being a second son.
Right.
So I don't know if that works. I do love the triangle that they've created. It's not a traditional lovers triangle, but I don't know, he's between Aemond, Aegon, and Alicent and Criston Cole. So that's not a triangle, obviously, but I love the power dynamic that's flowing between all of them, where Criston Cole and Alicent are giving each other weird looks across the council table, and then all of it is just perfect deliciousness.
By the way, Another knife that Alicent got in her back, another power move, was Larys when they were at the council table, and he was like, "Hey, lover boy, are you gonna stick up for your woman or your ally, the man?" And just basically, I called it the second coldest thing that Larys has done. Only the first was actually rather hot. Fire emoji. But yeah, no, that was the moment where she was like, wow, everyone's really against me and all these horrible things are going to happen and I can't do anything to stop it.
Yeah. Yeah. And Kristen Cole having no choice but to go with Aemond because he's already backed him secretly.
Right.
And it's all delicious.
Absolutely. Oh, Larys enjoyed that moment though, I think. He was like, yeah, keep your feet hidden.
Yeah. You're not going to give me any more feet? Fine. I won't back you at the council table. Although he's not, from their point of view, from that sort of patriarchal point of view and the power structures that they're operating, the dynamic that they operate from, the only choice for him is to back Aemond.
Well, I mean, Larys he serves himself first, and he's always he's a rat who's going to jump to the ship that is burning the least, you know?
Yes,
and so we saw him jump just recently to Aegon, and now he's like, oh, okay, Aegon's definitely burning the most. So Aemond it is.
And if I lend to Alicent my power, then I diminish myself, right? Then I'm on a losing thing. So Maureen D on the Discord, Master Orwell has a rough job. He's this episode's most valuable
respect
player.
For Master Orwell. He's one of the coolest heads on Team Green.
He is. He's navigating a very tricky set of waters. I'm wondering if Aegon Orwell, yes, will be conscious long enough to tell his mother the truth about what happened with Aemond, or if Aemond cares enough about whether anyone knows to finish the job with a pillow. Aegon was a jerk, but that's a rough sentence. Alicent suspects already. Helena knows, indeed. All right. Are the Greens winning? You want to read Cyrus?
Yeah. Cyrus says the Greens in general are more competent than the Blacks. The Blacks are in disarray. It's a house fighting itself. Oh, man, this is real world politics. Anyway, the house fighting itself with Daemon and Rhaenyra not working towards the same goal. For all the Greens' guile, they are competent to their last council member. Tyland, Larys, well, that part's not real well. Tyland, Larys, and even Cole are competent in their roles. So I think even with Aegon as the king, they were well positioned to win it all. It would be delicious irony if Otto started all this to prevent Daemon, who he considered Maegor come again, in taking the throne, only to have helped shape the Green heirs in doing the same. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. The modern political thing is that's good. But as we were saying before, right? It having story to help us reflect on the real world, I think is really important, whether they're direct parallels or direct tie-ins or not. I think The Boys this season was doing that. Were you keeping up with The Boys? I kind of checked out after episode 3.
Oh yeah, no, I'm halfway through the finale.
Okay. I heard the finale's a banger. Everybody's really
well, I have to say the actress who plays Starlight, like kudos to her. That must have been so fun to play the finale. I won't say more than that for spoilers, but
yeah. So yeah, it sounds like a mixed bag. Anyway, very good comment in terms of the parallels to what we're dealing with.
Well, yeah, because we know, this is a Game of Thrones spoiler, not a Fire and Blood spoiler per se, but we know that there will be a Mad King coming, and I think that it just has a lot to do with, like, these are members of the same family fighting each other, and just because they're told that they're gods, and who is the most god, and
as the non-book reader of our crew right now, it'll be really interesting to see how they line the tracks up between this history and what we know from Game of Thrones. That's they Better Call Saul tried to do this work, and I think they pulled it off. Is when you're doing the prequel is letting the story proceed as it would for those characters, but then actually connecting the rails so that the train car can roll smoothly from one storyline to the other. It's a hard lot of work. So
luckily it's laid out for them in a book.
Yes, indeed it is. All right, Nate, regarding Aemond and Team Green, am I a psychopath for thinking that Aemond taking over is a good thing? Every outlet is talking about him like he's a serial killer, but it was his doofus brother who was siring bastards for the fighting pits. It's Cole who has the hatred heart on for Rhaenyra, and it's Daemon who is quite literally a serial killer. I don't think he's going to get everything right, but the way he took command right away and has an obvious air of competency, efficiency, and command is kind of nice to see. Someone in one of the pods mentioned him as a budding Maegor the Cruel, and I honestly do not see that on screen. Maybe that's how it goes in the books. Yes, did he try to kill his brother? Sure, but can you blame him, both on an emotional and practical level? Aegon is an idiot. Everyone on Team Green is better off with Aemond in control. Yeah, so just furthering the conversation about Aemond and Aemond's competency and whether or not we should have him. You've got thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that how many dictators were raised with people saying, well, they're really competent and efficient and have a strong command.
Good point.
So, yeah, I mean, I see Nate's point, and I think we should just remember what the actor who plays Otto Hightower, he said they're all horrible people, and I can't wait to see them die.
It's true. It's true. And, we had a recent thing here in the United States where in one way, somebody could take advantage of that and then actually declared, hey, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stay within the norms as they've been laid down, as opposed to this weird ruling that would give me a whole bunch of other power. I think, and as much as some people would like that person to do that thing, at the same time, once you start breaking and busting through norms, as you say, once people start to exercise power beyond these norms, it's almost impossible
it's a slippery
to stop.
slope. Yeah.
Right. Because then the next person and the next person, and you have to think about the down chain effects of that. I don't disagree with Nate's point, though, because Aemond does seem like a much more competent person. So
right.
I feel it. I totally feel it. All right. You want to grab Cyrus's?
Sure. So is Aemond taking over a good thing? It's great for Team Green, but that does not exclude him from being a bad person. Being a bad person and being great for your cause are not mutually exclusive. Good point. Aemond is a kinslayer and an attempted kin/kingslayer in Westeros that is seen as pretty quote-unquote evil. If we are supposed to hate the phrase in in the Game of Thrones series for violating guest rights, which is, of course, the Red Wedding, kin/kingslaying is not far behind. Aemond is a quote-unquote problematic fave. You can like him and compliment his competence and yet have problems with him as a moral character. Yep. In short, I think people complaining about Aemond are the ones who have an issue with his moral character and not his competency. Yeah.
Good summation. And this is great because this is the dialogue is like, oh, they're making us root for obviously bad people. Right.
Well, it's also when you have like bad choices. I agree that Aemond seems better than Aegon, but Aegon we did see also at the beginning of the season. I was surprised they did make me feel a bit of like, oh, look at him. He's trying a little bit. Like he doesn't know what he's doing because he's not trained and he's not thinking this through. He's just impulsive. But he was like, oh, you lost your flock. You need money for metal. I'll give it to you.
Yeah.
He's just too incompetent.
Yeah. And it's a good point. And so he's trying and he's it's brilliant stuff. Okay, moving on. Team Green, Alicent, Sub-Zero. I love that scene where Alicent played her hand at the council meeting and got slapped down. For a full minute, she was just having a panic attack, and they made everyone else's voice sound like you were listening through noise reduction headphones. You can almost feel what she's feeling. Brilliant direction. And it was such a rookie move on her part. This is where Otto is sorely missed. She needed to canvass the council one-on-one ahead of time instead of getting embarrassed in public and losing any remaining cred she might have had. I have to say this scene really reminded me. I don't think I've had a full-blown panic attack, a real panic attack ever in my life. So, but this one touched on a situation for me once where I was going in, I was trying to angle for some employment-related things, and somebody just basically shut me down and said, well, you don't have this particular degree, therefore we can't even consider you, even though I had more experience than probably half the people in that building. And it was just such a gut punch. And I remember hearing that blood rush and just that emotional, like, oh, the world is not like I thought it was. And this is really awful. And I don't know what to do. And I think our brains process certain emotional responses. I think somebody's done some functional MRI mapping where you get some bad news or like somebody breaks up with you. Your brain's processing centers are almost similar as if you were physically, assaulted or, had somebody punched you or something like that. So that physiological response, I think, is a really great depiction on screen.
Yeah. Why? So someone who has had a history of anxiety attacks, and went to such an extent that I went to school to study this. This is one of the reasons why I got my psychology chains and my master's chain, my psychology links on my master's chain, is that it is like at the time, people will often, when they're having anxiety attacks, sometimes they think they're dying. I haven't had that, but it does have, what they did well with her is how like things become like a little bit fuzzy, and and you often see people like working their hands because it's a full physiological response where this cortisol, the stress hormones just flooding your body, and like you can even get the claw where your hand is just like paralyzed because of the stress running through you like a live wire. So it is really, it's intense.
Yeah, for sure. And to spend a whole minute was really incredible in terms of screen time and dramatic direction. All right. Who's up next? Christina J., I think. You want to get this one?
Yeah, sure. You asked what power Alicent still has. She has sent Otto on an unknown mission. Yeah, don't forget Otto and Darren. They finally said the name Darren. Aegon is isolated more than ever and has no one on his side and desperately needing his mother. He can trust no one but his mother. Well, if she transitions from subservience to those around her and uses weaknesses against each other, I'd argue she could do quite a bit. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is now Alicent, because she can no longer be the voice at the table in the council, she has to think more like Larys.
Yes. And I made this point on the main pod that this episode is when Rhaenyra found her power and found that she's like, okay, she has this internal realization that, okay, I didn't learn strategies and how to field armies and, create supply chain lines and stuff, but there's all these people around me who do know. So how do I activate them? How do I enroll them? How do I get them to, to balance and work with them? And I think Alicent has yet to do that, right? And I think this message points that out is she needs to start to learn how to manipulate things behind the scenes. Can she? Does she have the tools? That's a good question.
Yeah.
All right. Team Black, Damon, Davey Mack on Discord. I just want to say that I'm digging the Damon stuff. There's also some funny exchanges. And I think it's important to spend time with him if they are setting up a third party that will be vying for the throne. The point that I like about this is where we're getting a little bit of that humor relief. We talked a lot about season 1 being really good, really dramatic, but also very dry, and having a little bit of comic relief with Damon and being in Harrenhal and Sir Simon. It does provide that extra little bit of lubrication that we want. So with very difficult stuff, we need a little bit of humor release, and it's finely balanced, and I think they're doing it really well.
Yeah. And Lisa C says, here's my take on Damon's dreams in this episode as I continue to explore the thematic use of sex in the House of the Dragon. Damon has always been a sexual creature, using and confusing sex with power. See young Rhaenyra and Mysaria. As Damon strives to reclaim his sense of power, he subconsciously becomes intimately drawn to the one woman he believes he has always empowered him and never looked down on him, his mother, right? Because she wasn't real. So, I mean, she wasn't alive too. Within the walls of Harrenhal, his solitude and nightmares under the influence of Alice River's powers revert him to a helpless state in which he seeks the comfort of his mother as his ambition slips away from him. Damon's superiority complex and sense of power and greatness over others appear to be rooted in the idea that he was his mother's favorite child. So his vision of having sex with her twistedly brings him closer to the original source of this confidence and authority. His dream of Elysia tells him that he's stronger than Viserys, Rhaenyra, Aegon, and any other claim to the throne, and he responds with violence and betrayal as he fully embraces his desire to be king. The visions Alice is giving him are making him confront what he's become since his mother's death. Damon has been rejected by everyone he so desperately sought power over. Rhaenyra, Viserys, the Black Council, his own children, and now refuses to wash away the blood on his hands as he further pursues the favoritism and superiority he could lose growing up with. He lost growing up without his mother.
Pretty good analysis. Pretty good summation. I like it, Lisa C. I think you've put your finger right on it. He really is starting to believe his own bullshit here, right?
Right. Yeah.
But then every once in a while he gets a counterpoint where what's his former wife?
The one in the veil. Oh my gosh, Abby.
No.
Oh.
Corliss.
Oh my gosh.
Lena.
Now I'm seeing her face. Yeah, Lena. Yeah.
Yeah, where she's like, "Hey, what about our children? Things are getting crazy right now." So yeah, this is like his inner. This whole thing is his inner brain turned outwards, right? So we're seeing these warring conversations within him. But yeah, clearly his own sense of self-aggrandizement being spoken through his mother, this Oedipal dream with his mother.
Yeah.
Really good stuff.
Yep.
All right. Oh, go ahead. Let's see. Team Black, Bela. Jean-G on our Discord says, the Bela lines hit hard. About Lena, she died as she wished to die, with honor in Dragonfire, the way my mother chose and the way I myself wish to meet my end. I am blood and fire. Driftmark must pass to salt and sea. Yeah. Really good stuff. Thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of Bela love on the Discord, on Twitter, and yeah, I completely get it. Especially, my heart is still mending itself from Rhaenys, but I'm sure Bela's going to be my fave by the end of the season, because it's true, especially that because they did have to address the fact that Corlys, Bela's right there. Why wouldn't he? We don't want to overpaint him as sexist, although there's definitely a piece of that in there. We've seen, he's conflicted. It's complex for him as it is for a lot of men, I think. But so he does offer Bela, and she just comes back with it just so strong, like, nope, no, I am fire. I am blood and fire. Driftmark must pass the salt and sea. There's no contradicting that.
Yeah. And yeah, it was a solid. Yeah, absolutely solid. All right, you want to pick up
so Abby says, so does this episode confirm that Alinda Massey, Rhaenyra's hairstylist, is and was a Massaria girl? She knew which gold cloak to approach, and also a Massaria guy, apparently. What do we think Alinda's mission is? What does she bring to feed the discontented? And what will Massaria feed Rhaenyra? She is discontented too, isn't she? And she met up with Diana. So Diana is the... it's the young woman who we saw Alicent giving a moon tea to last season to get rid of a Targaryen bastard from Aegon, sorry. Abby's going to get on me about mixing up all these names.
No, it's okay. It's okay. As long as we try to correct, that's the...
Yeah. I know their names. Sometimes the wrong one comes out.
Look, people, podcasting's hard.
Especially when, George R. R. Martin, I feel like when he was writing his books, he was like, future podcasters are going to hate me.
Twist my mustache.
But anyway, yeah, so Diana, who Aegon raped her, and she was given a moon tea, and so she obviously will have a specific beef with Team Green, and so that's very interesting that she went to see her specifically, and yeah, it seems that she's a Massaria girl.
I'm going to jump forward a little bit to tie in to this. Regarding the small folk, Nate on the Discord said, the one thing I don't agree with so far is close the gates order. Your city has no food. You don't keep people in to starve. They need to read up on sieges. And then you, Alicia, said in the book it was Alicent who was blamed for shutting the gates out of King's Landing. So going back to this discontent and what Alinda is bringing to feed the discontented, I think when you have a urban center like this, and I was saying this on the main pod, if there's a high coefficient to trigger the pent up energy that is there, or the energy that is building up among the small folk, And once you release that, it's dangerous and deadly, and a lot of poor innocent people are going to die. But damn if it's not a major blow to whoever is holding on to that city and needing to hold on to that city. And you're really in a difficult position, because if you let them out, they're going to go sow fear and discontent into the land side, into the countryside. But you can't keep them in, because then it's just going to build as a pressure cooker. And this is where somebody with skills like Otto or with Lannister daddy, I'm blanking, from Game of Thrones.
Oh, with not Tyrion's father.
Tyrion's
Why?
dad. Yeah, that guy.
Tywin
Lannister. Thank you. With Tywin, they have the skills and the understanding to be able to manipulate and work that kind of thing. But just to shut the gates, I think, like Nate is saying, you're really endangering yourself. And I think this is a counterpoint to Aemond. Like, is Aemond a good ruler? Clearly, he's missing something here. And this is something where he hasn't studied this particular aspect of the life of the realm. And then if you do this, you're actually creating your own, creating a powder keg right underneath you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely.
You want to pick up
Yeah, so Athena says the Greens need to keep the economy of the war machine turning so they keep the people in the city. But it doesn't do anything for the people now trapped inside and starving. Without the Greens forcing on some sort of sustainable solution so people aren't starving to death soon, I definitely see riots being set up in the future.
Mm-hmm.
The food situation is something the Green propaganda machine could blame Rhaenyra for, since they are blockaded, but that could be cold comfort to the commoners. Greens definitely need Otto back to help some of this, I think. And yeah, just continuing with Cyrus, the show is really coding the small folk have a role to play, and when the ability overreaches, there are consequences. It's curious how in season 1, it was Daemon who was telling Rhaenyra not to discard the view of the small folk, and it's the Greens that are undermining them. So one thing I have to say, I saw a few people saying online is they thought, what do you think? Should the Greens have fed Melissa's meat?
No.
As Ulf pointed out, or was it Ulf or Hugo who pointed that out? Anyway, should they have fed that to the people and told them it was something else? This is what some people are proposing online.
I get why people would say that. And to go back to our primary world, one of the things that if you look at where we eat, and I know for vegetarians and vegans, this, I'm going to talk about meat consumption here, is that the further up the food chain you get, the less palatable,
the less tasty,
the less palatable the food is, and less nutrition. So we want to eat as low, without getting into moral judgments or ethical judgments or anything about that. But the lower down on the food chain you go, the more nutritious. So if you're eating plants and vegetables, you're taking from the sun. And then if you're eating the herbivores, which eat those things, that at the nutrient cycle coming up is still sufficient enough to be able to provide nutrition. The further you get up, that's why people don't eat lions and wolves. We don't eat that meat because there's no nutritional value for us.
Right. Well, it's just they need. I can say that house cats I know need an obscene amount of protein. And
they're obligate carnivores.
Yeah. And I am like the complete opposite of that, where I've done genetic testing and I have the genes that don't process protein as well, So, I wouldn't want to eat something that relies solely on protein because,
you're further up. And I don't know the biochemistry of that, but the further up you move from that, it doesn't do you any good. So, but I understand why people would go there. Right. Oh, that's just a big thing. Plus, I don't know if I want a bunch of acidic bile meat. I don't know. I might be a little bit off. Yeah, might be
it comes pre-charred.
Yeah. Good one. Funny, but still. So I think Athena's made a really good point here is that there's a whole bunch of different ways you could crank this. The other thing that I don't really understand is you've got an ocean blockade, so you're stopping food coming across from the sea, but behind you have the Kingswood, you have the Reach, you have the High Garden, that's the Reach, I think, right? And you have the Riverlands. Those are all productive agricultural lands. So what's the difficulty here? Is it because we're in a fall situation and winter is starting to set in?
Yeah, it's basically it's the positioning and the way that who is where, and they're blockaded basically from getting food in from their allied food producers.
But you have production land behind
so this
you.
is also why there's this like big rush for the Riverlands, because that's in the middle.
Yeah.
And so they need to be able to control passages to food producing regions that are allied with them somewhere. So this is what a lot of this season is about. How do we block off waterways? Because that's where obviously the Valyrians on Team Black. So they've got the waterways. The Pikes, we're not talking about them yet. They're on the other side of the continent.
Right.
So yeah.
I'm just surprised that the Red Keep is so dependent on ocean-based food consumption.
Because I mean, it's a fortress of sorts. You know, it's on a rocky like the fact that it's surrounded by water and it has that's a good defensive position, which is why it was developed as a capital. But now it makes it a good place to withstand a siege, but it can make it easier to cut off in this way. I guess also, when, you know, these are being settled, you don't necessarily consider, although this definitely comes back, that your family who owns the castle next door is going to be your enemy blocking you.
Well, I think, too, it goes to this wider point of, fine, you can study battles and you need generals and whatnot to understand, well, if I've got the high ground and I can attack at dawn and all of those sort of battle strategies. But the real war comes down to supply. And can you keep your people fed and keep your troops in the field and all of that? As they said a bunch of times in this season, when the dragons are doing combat, their consumption is way up. And if we don't have enough food for them to be able to do that, Vagar's depleted was a line that you need a lot of supply chain to keep an army in the field or to keep a dragon in the air. And all of that is pointing to war is not just about two groups of people squaring off against each other. It's the entire economy that supports that single incident.
Yeah, so. There was one thing that I thought was really done well in the Song of Ice and Fire books that didn't necessarily make it onto, and I don't hate the end of Game of Thrones the way John does, but and I understand that they, you know, had to cut certain things, but I was disappointed to see that perspective that you get in the books of how all of these machinations of the lords affects the people on the ground who are basically being forgotten about by them. That's lost a little bit.
Yeah. All right, final email, Kyle M. by email regarding Hugh the Scorpion Maker. The next steps here are simple. Number 1, Hugh gets angry about getting stiffed for his scorpions. 2, Hugh takes action by shooting Aemon and Vagar out of the sky. 3, Aegon, now recovering and grateful, apologizes and pays him double. 4, Hugh adopts the rat catcher's dogs and names it Scorpion. 5, the presence of the dog helps Hugh's child on the path to recovery. This is brilliant. I love this. 6, they buy a boat and sail to the Summer Isles. 7, Hugh opens a beach bar that serves umbrella drinks. Kokomo plays as we fade to black. And then that's just the end of the show. Unexpected series finale with happy peach ending. Books be damned. God, people would be so mad. I may never stop laughing.
And then the dragon, or the dog flies by on the dragon and gives you a thumbs up.
I love it. Yeah. No, the dragon is pulling the parasailers, or, you know, like they've got people doing the parasailing behind the dragon. With the dog as the pilot. Oh, good one. All right. Well, thanks for giving us a funny final send-off, Kyle. I think we need to wrap it up really quick because we've got a whole different schedule change. So, Acolyte, you're wrapping up on that. You've got a final couple of episodes coming.
Right. So I'm going to do, because John's under the weather, I'm releasing this week's wrap up. It's going to be just me, but we're going to like focus on the recap and the lore dive, so that when John's back on his feet, we're going to get his takes and talk through all the feedback that we've been getting in. And then we're going to do a season wrap up with a group of us in about a week or so.
Yeah. That'll be fun. Yeah.
And then, of course, other stuff continues on the Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast. And if you haven't, definitely check out the recent episodes about Visions. There's 3 episodes of Star Wars Visions, the animated anthology series about Sith of the Old Republic.
Very cool. I'm going to defer to our Discord. There is a channel there that John keeps up to date with all of the upcoming shows for all of our affiliates and our main feed. So check that out. We've got, we're continuing on with Hot Lore Summer. So there's still many things happening. I think it's going to be a Hot Lore Fall and Winter as well. I think 2025 is just hot.
Yeah, it's a super content year.
Yeah, we've got Dune Prophecy. We've got
I was just bringing up that Dune Prophecy is going to be at the same time as it looks like as the next Star Wars show, Skeleton Key, and then Pachinko is at the same time as Skeleton Crew. Skeleton Key is a movie, which is a fun movie. Pachinko, isn't that's earlier? Isn't that the same time
August.
as Rings of Power and Agatha? It starts.
Yes. And September. The new Alien Romulus movie is dropping in August 16th as well. And I've got a bunch of content that I'm working on there. I have to rework some things.
Did you see the final trailer that just released?
I did. And I haven't been able to process it yet and be with it. But it really does open up the world in some ways and gives us a lot more on what we already knew from the first trailer. So the 2 trailers work really well together. But I have thoughts. Yes, I definitely do.
My friend Martin, who Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast listeners know, said that he hasn't been this excited for a film in 5 years.
Yay. Very good. Very good. All right. So check the show notes for the link tree for all of our affiliate links. Check the Discord for the schedule. Elysia, you will be back here next week in my stead. Thank you for that. Feedback, HOTD at thelorehounds.com, or head over to thelorehounds.com and go to the contact page. And you can leave a voicemail or contact form. Oh, a quick plug for the blog, the Lorebrary, Brian8063, editor-in-chief. Anybody, not only subscribers, but anybody in our community, if you feel so inclined to write an article, go to the blog and just go to our website, lorehounds.com, go to the blog link, and there's an article posted in there that has our submission guidelines. And Brian will be happy to work with you on taking your submission, getting it into a format and putting it up. And again, exploring these different ideas about how these fantasy shows, I think friend of the pods, Duve71 just wrote an article about his personal experiences as a combat veteran related to Star Wars. So really interesting. Yes, with pictures. So, anything, if you want to talk about Oedipus, you want to talk about, Wheel of Time and magic and the Aes Sedai, whatever, it's all fair game.
We need Oshamir articles.
Okay, there you go. I don't know what that is, but we need them.
It's an Acolyte reference.
Okay.
You do know what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. We do. We do need some Acolyte articles. The power of one versus the power of many. Yeah, there's a lot of good material there. All right, we don't have the fancy music because I don't know. I didn't preload it. Blah blah blah. So I'll just run through the. Oh, do you want to give me a little scat bebop? Discord server boosters. Gnarls, Aaron K, Tiller the Thriller, Dork of the Ninjas, Duve71, Captain Gingy56, and Athena Adelia. Thank you for boosting the server. Lore Masters, Samartian, Michael G, Michelle E, David W, Brian P, SC, Peter OH, Bettina W, Adam S, Nancy M, Duve71, Brian 8063, Frederick H, Sarah L, Gareth C, Eric F, Matthew M, Sarah M, DJ Miwa, Andra B, Kwang Yu, Jedi Bob, Nathan T, Alex V, Aaron T, Sub-Zero, Aaron K, Dally V, Mothership 61, Gnarls, Kathy W, Stuart B, Jeffrey B, Elisa U, and always good things to those who come last, Adrian. Thank you all so very much for being Lore Master subscribers. Thank you to everyone who subscribes. Thank you to everyone who listens. We don't care if you're a subscriber or not. We're just glad that you're here and that you get to hang out with us and join us on the Discord where you can nerd out and enjoy good conversation. Elysia, thank you again for stepping up and stepping in.
Glad to get to chat about this episode.
Yes, and, it's good to have a triarchy, right?
Yeah. Give the people a different perspective. And I promise we'll take that spoilers comment on board. And when it's 2 book readers, we will watch ourselves.
Very good. All right, everybody. We'll see you. Well, I won't see you, but you'll see Elysia and John next week for episode 6. Until then.
The Lorehounds podcast is produced and published by The Lorehounds. You can send questions and feedback and voicemails at thelorehounds.com/contact. Get early and ad-free access to all Lorehounds podcasts at patreon.com/thelorehounds. Any opinions stated are ours personally and do not reflect the opinion of or belong to any employers or other entities. Thanks for listening. Okay, David, this is where we're supposed to choose a side, green or black.
John, my soul is as black as night. Your turn.
I am black for life.
So we're not fighting? I thought this is where HBO wanted us to pick sides and fight and stuff.
Don't worry, I'm sure we'll find plenty to disagree about on the pod, but we seem to agree on one thing. We both really like this show.
The politics, the drama, the lore. It was made for the Lorehounds.
And since we just finished recapping season 1, we couldn't be more ready to defend our Black Queen in the Dance of the Dragons.
And with the season pass option in Supercast, listeners can get early ad-free access to each weekly scene-by-scene deep dive, plus our custom show guide with all the characters and connections. See you in the Lorehounds podcast feed each week for our Dragonfire hot, but probably positive, takes.
The Lorehounds House of the Dragon coverage is also safe for Team Green consumption. Side effects may include a deeper understanding of dragon lore, a hardened conflict with itself, and an inescapable urge to read the book Fire and Blood by George R.R. Martin. Dragon seeds may experience burning.